Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Baines Planning Committee meeting. Also welcome to the people viewing in the council chamber and watching online via the webcast. My name is Councillor Sue Craig and I'm chair of the committee. Please can I remind everyone to switch their phones and iPads to silent during the meeting. Can I also please ask all speakers to make sure they speak into their microphones clearly and close to their microphones. This room is very, very echoey because we're so spread out, it's quite hard to hear. This meeting is being filmed and recorded and will be available on the council's website. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the council. Anybody speaking that does not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operator. As you will be aware, due to the afternoon start time, the application for Pixash Lane site was withdrawn from this agenda and will be considered at a future meeting. Can I now ask our Democratic Services Officer to read out the emergency evacuation procedure?
If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the named assembly point. From this room, you follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the main staircase or the stone staircase at the end of the room. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is at the Orange Grove grassed area outside Bath Abbey. For those people in the overflow seating in the council chamber, you should follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest to Bath Abbey or the main staircase. There are general public health principles that everyone should follow to help mitigate the risk of the spread of coronavirus, and these should be followed throughout your stay in the building. Maintain social distancing, clean hands regularly, avoid touching your face, and wear a face covering where necessary.
Thank you. Can I ask whether we have any apologies for absence or substitutions, please?
Yes, Chair. I have one apology from Councillor Shelley Bromley, and she's being substituted by Councillor Ruth Malloy.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Malloy. And do we have any declarations of interest? No. Urgent business agreed by chair. There is no urgent business today. Items from the public, statements and questions. The Democratic Service Officer will now inform us of the public speaking procedure for the meeting.
Members of the public and parish councillors have registered to speak about individual planning applications on the agenda. Ward councillors not on the committee have also indicated they wish to speak about applications. Speakers will be called to speak immediately after the case officer has made their presentation about the application. The order of speakers and the time allowed for speaking will be as follows. Parish Town Council representatives will speak first and will be allowed 3 minutes in total. Objectors to an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. Supporters of an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. If there is more than one objector or supporter of an application, they must share the 3 minutes allowed to each side. Ward councillors not on the committee who have indicated they wish to speak about an application may do so for a maximum of 5 minutes. Speeches will be timed by the traffic light system you can see on the table in front of me. At the start, the light will be green and will turn to amber when there's 1 minute of speaking time remaining. When the light turns red, speakers should immediately conclude their remarks.
Thank you. So minutes from our last meeting on the 2nd of June. These have been circulated. Can I either have questions or someone move to adopt them? Councillor Jackson. And
Did you?
Thank you, Councillor Davies, for second. Right, on to the main plans list, and our first one this afternoon is Waterworks Cottage, Fairfield Park, Bath, and I will invite the case officer, Samantha Mason, to present her report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this proposal is seeking permission for the extension and alteration to an existing cottage and the creation of 2 detached dwellings. The site is located along Charlcombe Way within the built-up area of Bath, within the Lambridge ward. Just by way of background, the initial application involved the demolition of the existing cottage on site. The scheme has now been amended so that the cottage is retained and extended. So the site is shown edged in red on the location plan and marked with the red dot on the aerial plan. Charlcombe Way bounds the plot to the west, a small unadopted track that provides access for the existing dwelling and to Charlcombe pumping station runs along the north of the site, along here. The Greenbelt and ANOB are beyond this to the north. The site is not within the conservation area, but is within the World Heritage Site. The nearest bus stop is located 120 metres away around the end of Salisbury Way, next to the substation, walking distance from the site. It's just off of this map. So next we have the existing site location plan. It's a little busy because it has the contours on it, but you can see the cottage is located centrally within the plot here. And then this slide shows the proposed site plan. The cottage is to be extended by a single-storey extension to the east, here. The proposed plot 2 is located in the top west corner, and proposed plot 3 in the east corner. So here are the existing elevations of the cottage, which has been deemed a non-designated heritage asset. The cottage has had alterations over the years, including a new roof and lean-to extensions, as you can see. So these are the proposed elevations for the cottage. The top left is the east elevation, where you can see the single-storey extension with the pitch roof will be sited. The bottom left is the west elevation, which is essentially the street scene. The dwelling is built into the slope, so only the top of the roof is visible from the street. And you can see the proposed parking also to the side here. To the right are the 2 side elevations. You can see how the extension is joined by a glazed link. Next, we have the proposed floor plans of the cottage showing the single-storey extension. The glazed link will have an entrance, and the main extension will accommodate additional living space. And then the proposed roof plan. Next are the elevations for plot 2. The cottage has also been shown for context. The drawings again do have a lot of annotations, so they're also quite busy. But plot 2, just here, it's a contemporary design with a flat roof, as you can see. It's built into the slope across 3 levels. It will be set down in height just from the cottage and constructed of natural materials. The top shows the east elevation, and the bottom shows the west street scene sort of elevation again. And then here are the side elevations for plot 2. You can see more clearly here how it will be cut into the slope. Then next, the proposed, moved on too far. So the proposed floor plans. The dashed line shows the plot boundary. The cottage is just shown in the bottom here again for context. So here we have the basement floor plan to the left and the lower ground floor plan to the right. And then the upper ground floor. The dwelling will be 4-bed. So next, the proposed elevations for plot 3. The south elevation is the top left, and the north elevation is the top right. This is the elevation that faces towards the unadopted access lane. Then bottom left and right are the west and east elevations, respectively. And then the proposed floor plans. Plot 3 is 2-storey, so we have the ground floor plan to the left, and the right is the first floor plan. Again, this dwelling is 4-bed. So next up is the sections. The top is taken from across the length of the plot. Up here is 9 and 10 Chalcombe Way, the garages to those properties. This is roughly where Chalcombe Way is on the flat, sloping down to the cottage. Plot 2 just in the background there. The extension's not shown, but then it slopes down towards plot 3 at the very bottom of the site. Then the through section, again 9 and 10 Chalcombe Way set up here, the cottage, the proposed parking area, and plot 2. So this is the setting out plan, which just shows a little bit more detail of the landscaping, including the trees and the red hatched areas, which are areas of ecological enhancement. And then this slide shows the swept path analysis for each of the driveways and the unadopted access lane. So onto some photos. This slide just generally shows the existing cottage taken from various angles. So you can see it more clearly set into the slope here, as well as some of the lean-to extensions. And then some photos with neighbouring properties in for context. So this one is looking towards the south with Coombe House in the background. And then this is taken in front of the porch in the main garden of Waterworks Cottage. Again, this is Coombe House and its garage in the south there. Then this is taken just off of the road in the garden of the cottage, looking up towards 10 Chalcombe Way. And then this one is set down at the bottom of the access, the unadopted access road, the gate to the waterworks, or to the pumping stations there. Plot 3 will be roughly here, and the properties of Fairfield Park Road just in the background. So here the photo in the top left is taken from Chalcombe Way, looking across the site. So you can see the roof, the existing cottage. Bottom left is taken slightly further along Chalcombe Way, and this is looking back down towards the unadopted access road. Then this is taken between the cottage and Coombe House, looking across the garden towards the fields in the background. And then this is slightly further sort of back towards in front of the porch, again looking at sort of Fairfield Avenue, Fairfield Park Road properties. Just a couple of internal photos for context. And then finally, some of these photos are taken from the LVIA. So this top one is taken from Collier's Lane, looking back towards the city. The site is marked with the black line, it's just in there. This middle photo is again from Collier's Lane, but it's at the start of the public footpath. And then this bottom one is taken from Salisbury Hill. And then this middle bottom is the footpath, taken from the footpath running along the north-south between Chalcombe Lane and Larkhall. Again, the black arrow, just denoting where the site is. And then this is a photo I took in the field adjacent to the dwelling, and I'm looking sort of directly, it would be through this vegetation over here. So to conclude, the proposal is recommended for permission for the reasons set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So we have 5 speakers on this one. Just for the people who are watching, I see the first 2 speakers already in place, thank you. The people who are watching, we will have a slight gap due to COVID restrictions. We can only have a maximum number of people in this room, so we have to switch speakers in between each set of 2. So our first speakers are Nicholas Burgess and Alexandra Best, who are sharing 3 minutes. I don't know which one of you would like to start. Alexandra, if you can switch your mic on and go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Can you hear? Lovely. BPT maintains that the cumulative scale, massing and density of the proposed development would constitute overdevelopment of this garden site and would harm local landscape and townscape character. The area is of a mid-density residential grain with dwellings set back from the road with generous private gardens. The site's subdivision to provide 3 dwellings would therefore result in excessively cramped overdevelopment of the site, uncharacteristic of established townscape form, pattern and grain. The siting of Plot 2 would be located in close proximity to the cottage, impacting upon its historic setting and unbalancing the cottage's central position, resulting in harm to the non-designated heritage asset. This development would further urbanise Bath's rural periphery with increasing residential density and hard landscaping, with direct intervisibility with the AONB and Greenbelt. The densification of this garden site would detract from retained green landscape character and visual openness of the townscape in views from and across the Greenbelt and AONB. This application constitutes overdevelopment of the site, harm to the setting of a non-designated heritage asset, harm to the indicative townscape setting of the conservation area, AONB and Greenbelt, and harm to the green setting OUV of the World Heritage Site. We therefore call for this application to be refused.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. We hope members have had the chance to visit the site and see the representations from the local community and beyond. Please refuse this application on grounds of damage to the ecology of the area, failure to provide safe means of access, unacceptable harm to users of the highway and byways, degradation of the significance of a locally listed heritage asset, and cumulative harm to the setting of the World Heritage Site. We are a close-knit community and we look out for each other. This overdevelopment would damage both our and the wider community in many ways. The narrow cul-de-sac with no footway will be largely unusable during construction and unsafe afterwards because of the increase in traffic. So walking to see each other and chatting in the road will become dangerous. The many pedestrians and cyclists we meet from further afield will also be at risk. Plot 3 residents will be isolated at the bottom of a steep private road. If they need an ambulance, access is not possible as even cars require multiple manoeuvres to turn in and out of that road. The risk of a repeat of the Lansdowne Lane tragedy is obvious if construction traffic comes down Richmond Heights, which has a record of cars crashing into the wall and fence at the bottom, even in good weather. We are proud to nurture a regionally important population of amphibians, protecting them on their migration to the nearby lake, and providing feeding and hibernation sites in our gardens. The many vehicles on site year-round will kill amphibians, and the toll cannot be monitored. I could list many more technical issues, but time does not allow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could just switch over to the next speakers now. Thank you both. So it's Mr. Dance, Chris Dance. Are you ready to go ahead with your speech?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair and members. This application comes before you today after extensive dialogue with the case officer, both during the pre-application stage and also the formal application determination stage. This has been a most constructive process whereby any amendments that have been requested have been adhered to, and this has resulted in the comprehensive report before you today recommending approval. This thoroughly analyses all the key planning issues, meticulously articulates each one and recommends that planning permission be granted. I'd just like to say the highlight the salient points why planning permission should be granted. With regard to the principle of development, the site's within a defined built-up area of Bath, therefore the principle of residential development is acceptable. In terms of heritage impact, throughout the lifespan of the application, the applicant has worked diligently with the case officer and the heritage officers to address all heritage issues. As you can see, the existing cottage is now retained. It's in a very tired condition. It'll be comprehensively refurbished, made purposeful for modern living accommodation, and will have a modest, suitably designed extension as part of those comprehensive works. In terms of design, as indicated in the officer report, there's a mix of dwellings and styles locally and a variety of plot sizes. The proposed dwellings are of a contemporary style, incorporating a high standard of architectural form, materials and detail, resulting in an attractive new urban form for this site. The plot coverage will accord with the densities found elsewhere in the locality and will not result in overdevelopment of the site. In terms of landscape, great care has been taken to ensure that the scheme will be nurtured into the form and contours of the site. This application is supported by extensive landscape visual analysis information, and as you'll see in the report, is fully supported by the landscape officer who's evaluated all that information. In terms of residential amenity, we've been particularly sensitive to the nearby residential properties and ensured the scheme's carefully designed in terms of layout, form, orientation to ensure there's no overlooking, overbearing impact or loss of amenity. In terms of transport, I use the phrase again, diligently we worked with your transport officer to ensure all matters are addressed. These are fully evaluated in the report, and the highway officer recommends that no objections are raised. In terms of ecology, there's a fully ecological management plan that will be maintained in perpetuity. And finally, there's full information with regard to drainage and sustainable construction. We feel we've covered all bases with this application, and I've got the full officer support in your recommendation. I'm going to say to you, members, it's a good officer report you've got there. It evaluates all the key issues. I will urge you, when you're taking the final judgment on this application, to address and hear those issues in the report and follow the officer recommendation and grant planning permission for this development. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dance. If you could move now and let the final two speakers in. Afternoon. Finally, we have the two Lambridge ward councillors, Councillor Appleyard and Councillor Wright. Who would like to go first? Councillor Appleyard, start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I won't be taking up my full 2.5 minutes on this one. This application, as you can see, if you've been on the website, has generated a lot of community comment, over 300, and a lot of them are around the preservation of the host building. The revision of the planning application actually preserves that host building, but extends that host building. So a lot of those concerns have actually been met with the work that's been happening by the applicant with the planning officer to arrive at a much better position in terms of an application that the officer feels that they can support now. I think it's a very good report. It covers off lots of issues. There's not one single element in there that I can find that causes me greater concern, except for the question about overdevelopment. There has been a decision or a position taken that it's not an overdevelopment. If the committee is mindful to follow that recommendation, could I ask the committee to pay particular attention to the location of the property number 3 in relation to the neighbouring property in terms of overbearing and overlooking? And also, could the committee pay particular attention to any conditions around the construction management plan to mitigate down as much inconvenience to that locality as possible during any construction stages? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Appleyard. Councillor Wright?
Thank you. Firstly, I would really like to offer my thanks to the report from the officers, which has been very well written and put together and given a great deal of due diligence. As Councillor Appleyard has already said, over 300 residents have objected to this planning position and the development of Waterworks Cottage. During the pandemic, this is a route that a huge number of residents take as a walking route and is a very important site for lots of local people in the area. So is understandable why so many people have objected to this particular planning. The site is on a very steep bank, and the construction of a new building would seem unreasonable to me. The proposal lists 2 additional changes to the original building. So I would suggest that the one building, an extra one building, would seem appropriate. And particularly because of due to close proximity to other homes, it is going to cause a lot of problem for local people. The site is also on a migratory route for frogs and is an important element of consideration to why this building should not take place. So I, along with Councillor Appleyard, would steer this committee to making a site visit before making any decision on this development. Thank you.
Thanks very much. You can stay there if you want or go back and join the others. It's up to you. It's up to you. If you want to go back in the council chamber and watch, then okay. Thank you. Questions to the officer? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. The speakers, the 2 ward councillors, have both mentioned the question of the relationship of the building on plot 3 to the neighbours, and I wondered if the officer could illustrate exactly how close this building is going to be to the neighbourhood. And secondly, my instinctive feeling is that this is an unsustainable location. Could the officer indicate where the nearest bus stop is, please?
Yes, thank you. So if I just brought back up the proposed site plan here, I believe Councillor Appleyard was raising concern in the main with plot 3. Plot 2 is obviously located to the north of the dwelling, the existing cottage, so it doesn't have really any other neighbours directly bounding the site because the road sort of intervenes here, and this will be, as you probably saw, the front elevation, which is relatively, it will be single story from street scene. So this third plot here, plot 3, it'll be 2-story, but it's only the pitch. I'll show you the elevations again in a second. It's only the pitched element here, which is 2-story. This part is flat sedum roof. So it does bound the neighbour's property, which is, this is Coombe House, and then I believe this is 136 Fairfield Park Road. So you can see that it does bound the gardens of these 2 properties, and some of its amenity space is down here and some round the back here. But my opinion is that because the majority is single story and windows have been avoided in this elevation, that the relationship here would not result in any significant issues in terms of impact of residential amenity of these neighbours. If I just show you the proposed elevations for plot 3. Yeah, so this side, this south-facing elevation is the elevation that will face towards the neighbours, rear gardens. So you can see the only real element is the door here, which is at single story. Again, given the topography of the site and the sloping nature, it's going to have very limited impact at all, in my opinion, on residential amenity. In terms of the bus stops, the site is within the built-up area of Bath, so it's considered to be within the settlement boundary, essentially. So it is considered to be a sustainable location for the purposes of sort of planning policy. You can't quite see on here, but this map shows the junction. This is Charlcombe Way, Fairfield Park Road. Just along here, this is Salisbury Way, which you can see a little bit more of here. There's a substation about here, and just off the map is the nearest bus stop. So it's about 120 metres away, quite reasonably within walking distance, I would say.
Thank you.
Could I have
Yeah.
another question? I forgot to ask, whereabouts is the lake that these amphibians are heading for?
Yeah, so there's a pond within this adjacent field, and then there's toads and frogs that have taken a migratory route across the sort of Charlcombe Valley, as I understand it.
Okay. Councillor Hughes, I think you had your hand up. Did you have your hand up? Yeah. Go ahead then.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just looking at the reports from Quantoc Ecology and from our own ecologist, and they seem to be at slight odds as to the presence of amphibians on the sites. Can you give us any clarification on that?
Well, I think my report sets out that there are frogs and toads in the area which take a migratory route across this area. An assessment of reptiles, including great-crested newts, was undertaken because of the nearby pond, and there was no great-crested newts found. So great-crested newts are a protected species in terms of ecology within planning, but frogs and toads don't have the same protected species status, but we do know that obviously they are found locally. So hopefully that clarifies.
Sorry. My concern is that they didn't find any evidence of great-crested newts, but they didn't find any evidence of any amphibians, even though we know their presence. So I'm not sure how valid the report is from Quantoc Ecology.
Yeah, so I mean, it's possibly to do with the time of year when the survey was taken. I think from my understanding, the migratory route is in spring. I don't know off the top of my head the exact date this report and survey was undertaken, but the council ecologist is suitably qualified to obviously take a view on that as well, and she did not object and has recommended conditions which do include the sort of mitigation and enhancement of ecology, including that of the local amphibian frog and toad population, even though they're not protected species by planning. So they have taken that into consideration in the mitigation and enhancement and in the construction ecological management plan. So as far as planning is concerned, and as far as I'm concerned, the lack of objection from our ecologist would imply that the information provided is acceptable.
Okay. Councillor Crossley, did you have your hand up? Your microphone's not on.
Sorry. My question is also on frogs, toads and newts. It's important to know when these surveys were done, because if they were done from early January to end of March, then the frog toads and newts wouldn't be there because they'd be in the pond. And so they wouldn't have found the evidence. I think whether there is or isn't the great crested newt is not the be-all and end of all of it. This is a very important migration area for 3 endangered species, you know, in what is the most biologically impoverished country in the world, in the UK. And this is a very important area for those 3 sets of animals. So I think it is important, before we reach a decision, we know when this survey was done. Because as I said, if it was done from any time January, February, March, then the very large number of animals that are on migration in that area will be in their ponds or heading towards their ponds. If it's done in April, for instance, then there'll be no, you know, they might still be in the pond. You know, we need to know when the survey was done.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up. The supplementary survey, the second survey that was undertaken, the additional one, I've just found that was submitted on the 6th of May. But I'm just struggling to find the...
So the report says that the samples were tested on the 28th of April.
Oh, perfect. There you go then.
Anything else, Councillor Crossley, on that?
So 28th of April, so they're all in their ponds breeding then?
Well, I don't know the ins and outs of ecology. That's why I consult the ecologist for the council. But I understand that the surveys were undertaken and then a supplementary survey was also undertaken when the pond was raised by a local. And both have found that, as I've said, there are frogs and toads locally, but not great crested newts. Like I say, the mitigation and enhancement does plan for those creatures. So the council's ecologist didn't request any further surveys. I know that when we have, for example, have other applications for bats, surveys are requested and sometimes additional surveys, and the application will be essentially paused until those surveys can be taken. So whilst I'm afraid I can't answer your question directly, I would expect that our ecologist would have asked for additional surveys if she felt that was necessary, if these were perhaps taken at the wrong time. But the survey season is usually spring, so I believe that they're probably satisfactory.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, sorry, that's on. Yeah, I think more questions on ecology really, because I think the increase in hard standing on this site for two new properties requiring parking for 3 cars on plots 1, 2 and 3, and then new parking for plot 1. So the ecology is really important to balance that out. And I just wanted to bring up a question from the ecologist's final report. And the ecologist says the question remains with these offsetting wildlife areas, the long-term maintenance of these, how do we envisage that this is going to be enforceable, that this will actually be delivered? And I just also wanted to check that on the final plans there's red areas, hatched areas, fenced off areas to be enhanced, which look to me like existing green areas. And I just wondered what weight the enhancement of these areas that were already green with trees and other vegetation, what weight that was given in the decision.
Yeah, so hopefully I've got all that down. There are a number of enhancements that are taking place across the site. Let me just bring up the ecological enhancement plan. So there is net gain achieved on the site, which again the council ecologist confirms. Here we go. And agrees with. So the red areas, at the moment, the entire area surrounding the dwelling, the existing dwelling, is garden land. It's not particularly, it's just sort of standard grass area. There are some trees. The 3 hatched areas here, will be areas of ecological enhancement. So as you said, they will be separated off, which means that they won't be treated as garden. So the construction and ecological management plan and the ecological enhancement plan, details of which are secured by condition, will ensure that these areas can't be used as garden. So they will be used in a way to achieve ecological enhancement. So it will be sort of species-rich planting. There's a number of mitigation points actually which I've put down here. So the planting will be appropriate for foraging invertebrates, bats and birds. There will be reptile habitat creation, which will include brash piles. There will be bat boxes and bird boxes, and additional connectivity through the site for amphibians. I'm afraid I don't know the detail of what that exactly looks like, but those are the mitigation measures listed, including the lighting plan. And so these areas will, I mean, at the moment, the cottage could use the garden in any way they wanted. They could, landscape it entirely, with just plain grass or whatever. So these will be achieved in perpetuity, along with the additional hedgerow planting. It's considered a net gain in terms of ecological improvement compared to a standard garden, despite obviously the increase of hard developed area. So I hope that makes sense. Oh, and you also asked, so the condition that I've included will require that details are put forward of who maintains that. It could be that it's either up to the individual 3 individual future owners, or, for example, a management company is created which deals with all 3 plots. That probably is less preferable given that it's 3 individual dwellings rather than, for example, a block of flats or something like that. But that can be achieved through the condition. If members were very strongly minded, it could be achieved through a legal agreement. But I considered that the condition was acceptable, as did the ecologist, hence why that was the route that I took.
Okay, Councillor Hodge, any follow-up?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Any more questions for the officer? Oh, Councillor Davis, sorry, you did put your hand up.
Thank you. It's just this is time for the highways this time. They spoke about, and I know you've done, don't have any objections now, but can you just clarify, they were talking about accident records coming down from Richmond Heights and about safe access and manoeuvring in and out of the junction. Could you just clarify that whether you've got any records of accidents or anything on the junction?
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, there are no recorded personal injury accidents in the vicinity of the application site during the last 60 months. We do, however, acknowledge that the personal injury accidents are recorded by Avon and Somerset Police, and they are collisions which occur which do result in injury. There is no mechanism for recording damage-only collisions or near misses, but there certainly aren't any personal injury collisions on the record.
Okay. Councillor McPhee.
Hello? Yeah. Following up on that question, are you going to be able to get recycling, delivery vehicles, supermarket vehicles to go down there? They're not going to be able to turn round, and they're going to have to reverse out in a very narrow lane. Isn't that correct?
Thank you, Chair. At the moment, the access does provide vehicular access to the parking associated with the current dwelling. As part of this, plot 3 will be provided with parking, which can also double up as a turning area, which means that any vehicle that does go down to plot number 3 is able to turn within the curtilage of plot number 3 and then come up the unadopted road in forward gear and come out onto Chalcombe way in a forward gear, but we do acknowledge that that will need a multi-point manoeuvre at the top of the hill where it joins the public highway, but that is very much what happens now.
So where is that manoeuvring? Can you show on there where that is? Ah,
Just within the turning area within plot 3 here.
so you wouldn't have cars parked there routinely?
You would. The requirement is for 3 parking spaces and then the turning area here. So it's this, I don't know if you can see the circular point.
Right. No, my point is you're not parking in the turning area. They've got separate space.
Well, yes, I mean, again, a conditions included to ensure no obstruction. But yes, potentially somebody could park there, a visitor or something that would be, you know, but we would seek to control that through the condition. But again, you know, there is multiple dwellings already down this lane where vehicles do need to already access.
Yeah.
There's no alterations to the road itself.
Is that okay, Councillor McPhee?
Sorry, yeah.
Any more questions? Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. So I just have one more question to do with the ecology. Okay. So our ecologist has suggested that we should follow a recommendation from FrogLife, which says that we recommend that ongoing amphibian monitoring is undertaken on this site to understand whether or not the mitigation measures are effective. So I just want to know, firstly, who's going to be doing the monitoring? And if the mitigation measures are not effective, what happens then? There isn't a reverse option, is there?
Yes, so again, one of the conditions of my report, apologies, I don't have it in front of me, I'm not sure if you'll be able to scroll to it, but I think it's the ecological enhancement condition does include for the monitoring, and it does include that a mechanism must be put forward as part of that to address who will be undertaking that works. That could be that the applicant employs their own ecologist, or could be done, you know, in conjunction with FrogLife or you know, some other mechanism. So they would need to discharge that condition successfully. So the ecologist would need to be satisfied that the chosen route for those monitoring works was acceptable. If it's unsuccessful, I don't believe there's a mechanism in there that covers, you know, this unsuccessfulness of it. But the point is the monitoring, as far as I understand it, and the request has been included. The request from FrogLife has been included within the ecological enhancement condition. Even though whilst they are important, they are not protected species.
Okay, so no more questions? Councillor Jackson?
I'm uncomfortable with the design of the house on plot 3, and I just wondered about that flat roof. I mean, it couldn't by any chance be a sedum roof, and that might help towards the ecological mitigation.
Yeah, so just bringing the plans back up. This is plot 3. The flat roof will have a sedum finish, as shown here. So it won't just be, again, that was partly for sort of biodiversity and ecology, as I understand it, but also to soften the view across the top of plot 3. So that's just that bit there. Yes.
Okay, so if we could move to the debate. Are you a question or debate?
It's a question, another question.
Okay.
Sorry, one more question. So, I'm just concerned about the design of plot 2, actually, the three-storey, 4-bedroomed sunken house. Could we see that again? And then, are you able to tell me the distance of the house from the nearest point of Waterworks Cottage?
I'm afraid I don't have that measurement in front of me, but I would sort of guess at around an estimate of around a metre or so.
And so the design, they're the same height, but it's, you know, there's completely, you know, it's a totally modern design, the plot too.
Yeah, so it's just slightly set down in height. I mean, there's obviously a chimney, but the ridge height, the eaves, the ridge, the flat roof is just set down. As you can sort of see along there. It's just set down from height. But yes, it's roughly the same height. This is approximately what you'll see sort of from the street scene, although there is a hedge that does shield part of that. But yes, it's obviously a contemporary design. It does have sort of local context in terms of its materials. To the front, there'll be rubble stone and bath stone ashlar, and then there's timber boarding to the rear, again with some rubble stone and ashlar detailing on these elements. It's a bit difficult to tell because the drawings are black and white, but it's natural materials.
And the view viewed from the lane by walkers and all the other houses is the bottom view.
That's right.
It's the lower view, and you feel they will sit okay side by side, those two designs?
Yes, it will be a juxtaposition, but I consider that it will be acceptable. And then, as you've picked up, the view from the road will be the sort of more in-keeping materials view in terms of it being stone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can we move to the debate now, please? Who would like to open the debate? Councillor Houtsell. No.
Oh, yeah. Right, the host building's being preserved. The site itself is quite sizable, and so I think the argument for overdevelopment isn't strong. I don't consider that there's a significant loss of amenity to neighbours, as has been pointed out by the distances involved and the views involved. Issues around ecology are addressed in condition 14, which is on page 96 of our papers. It says no development shall take place until full details of an ecological management plan, etc., have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. And then it goes on to list what would be in that plan, and it actually talks about the amphibians and toads and so on. And it also talks about establishing the legal responsibility for the wildlife areas and habitat and the long-term management. So just to say again, I mean, it actually says no development should take place until full details are signed off by the planning authority. So that's a very strong condition. There are improvements with the manoeuvrability on site, and vehicles will be able to access and egress in forward gear. And at the moment, I'm not about to propose a motion. I still want to listen to the debate, but at the moment I can't see any reason to overturn the officer's recommendation and very thorough report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you. I'm a little bit more concerned about this than Councillor Hounsell is. It's clear to me that you know, everyone said this is a very good report, and I'm sure it is. But to me, there is a lot of questions that I think need answering. You know, the slope of the land, the lay of the land, the position of this land in relation to the migration routes, and I don't think it matters really from my perspective whether there's a great crested newt in that. You know, all our amphibians are under threat, and we've got a number of extra cars coming in here. So I think that actually this is one of those sites that would be beneficial to the committee if we were actually to view it on site and so therefore I would like to move a site visit.
So we have a proposal for a site visit. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hodge, you seconding?
Yes, I second that proposal.
Councillor Jackson, did you want to speak or are you going to second? Okay, so we have a proposal on the table. Does anybody else want to contribute to the debate before we take a vote on that? Councillor Hodge, you've got a hand up?
No, actually, no. I'll wait with my
No.
comments, that's fine.
Councillor Hughes, then Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, yeah, I support the idea of a site visit on this one for numerous reasons, but I think we also, as well as the site visit, we really need to get our heads around this ecological management plan, because I think for a site like this, that plan needs to be in place before it comes to this committee, not as a condition afterwards. I think we should be able to consider that plan as part of this process and not leave it to a later date. I am concerned about the ecological issues raised for this site. I appreciate that they want to put in monitoring to check that the mitigation measures are working, but once the site's built, if the mitigation isn't working, there is no way of reversing it in exactly the same way as we had the issues with English Combe Lane. Once the site's there, that's it. So, but yeah, I agree with the site visit.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I would go along with the site visit, but at the same time, whereas I have a lot of sympathy with the objections and looking at the objections, I think there's been objection on just about anything that you could object, which I think sometimes mitigates against some of the objections, particularly when I'm satisfied that what the officer's saying is that basically what she's saying along with the ecological officer, that this is policy compliant. So although I have a lot of heart, my heart would be sympathetic towards a lot of the comments made by the residents, my head at this point in time would very much be supportive of what the officers put forward, because I think that is following the policy. All right. Did you hear all that, or was I talking to myself?
I did.
You did? You didn't hear it? Just about. Okay. Well, in essence, all I'm saying is I'm not persuaded that all of the comments against this application are valid in terms of policy, but I do understand from a heart point of view why they're made, because I probably would express the same. But I do accept what the officer has put forward in terms of the policy side of it. So I shall support the view of having a site visit, and I'm to be persuaded one way or the other at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Point of order, Chair. As there is a motion on the table to have a site visit, I believe we should go straight to the vote and not prolong the debate.
Can someone tell me whether that's a rule?
I think that has been the tradition normally, Chair, as I understand it. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor McPhee. Okay, so we have motion on the table to have a site visit proposed by Councillor Crossley, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Could all those who are for that motion raise their hand, please?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Councillor McPhee, did you have your hand up?
Sorry.
No.
No, sorry, I couldn't see you very well down there. So that's 9 in favour and 1 against.
Were you against or?
I'm against.
Okay. Is that everybody? That's everyone. Thank you. Can we move on to the next one, please?
Chair, do you just want to clarify when that site visit will be so that any of the members of the public will be aware, and it will be coming back to our next meeting? possibly?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Do you want to clarify when the site visit will be and that this application will come back to the next meeting so that any members of the public are aware of the process?
Yes, of course, yes. The site visit will happen before the next meeting, and the application will come back to the next meeting.
Do we have a provisional date for that meeting?
So the next meeting is on 28th of July. Site visits are on the 19th of July.
Okay.
Chair, apologies if I'm on holiday that week, so I'll go and have a look at it myself separately before the holiday.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Okay, so our next item is Crewcroft Barn, Hinton Charter House. And when you're ready, Tessa Hampton, yes, I'd like to start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. This application relates to a barn conversion and alterations to the original building to form a straw bale passive house standard dwelling at Crewcroft Barn, Hinton Hill, Hinton Charter House. So this is the application site edged in red. The existing barn is located off an access of Hinton Hill. The site is within the Greenbelt and the AOMB. This is the village of Wellow and the village of Hinton Charter House, and this is the barn centrally in between the two villages. So this is the existing elevations. You have the existing stone barn, which is part of the original building, and you have the timber-clad extension above the stone rubble wall here, which was the original. This is the extension, but I think this here formed part of this original dwelling. This is the existing elevation, so the existing floor plan. So this is the existing barn, which you can see the stone barn in here, and this is the floor plan of the timber-clad extension. So these are the proposed elevations. So you can see the existing original barn here, and the timber-clad stone extension will be replaced by this extension in here. And these are the proposed floor plans. So you can see the living space and some bathrooms en suites within the existing stone barn, and the extension accommodating the rest of the living space. This is the aerial photography. This shows the building as it's developed over the years. So this is 2017, so starting the most recent. So this is the stone barn, and this is the timber-clad extension. You can see this is also there in 2014, but this isn't there in 2013 and 2009. Then going back just a bit further, 2006, 5, 1999 and 1991. This is just the existing stone barn there. This is a plan which I think the applicant has asked to be shown. So this is shown, I'm not sure which date this is from, but it's a much older OS plan which shows a larger building in the situ. They've also asked to show the 1942 sales particulars of the building, so this is in here. Just moving on to this comes from the 1942 sales particulars as well, which show the stone barn, which you can see today, and the larger building, which would have been there in 1942. These are just some photographs of the site. So this shows the stone part of the building and just behind the timber extension. This is the interior stone structure, which shows the blocked opening of the southwest flank wall. This is just looking up towards the site with the stone barn and again the extension to the rear. And this is just showing the northeast corner of the site. It's just a further photographs which shows the stone barn with remnants of the rubble stone wall below the timber clad extension. Again, this is just from the other angle. So again, this is the stone extension, which is considered as the original building, with the rubble stone wall, the ruins of the stone wall, and the extension above. Again, this is the southwest elevation, which shows a similar thing with the extension above the stone walls and the stone barn. Just a few more photographs. Again, this just shows it a bit clearer from this angle. Again, the extension here and the stone barn. Just a couple more photographs which show the gable end and the extension with the rubble wall. And these are just some photographs inside. Sorry, I don't know why this one is come upside down. This is inside the timber extension, so it's a stone building but with a timber clad extension. So this is the existing extension. And this is just finally the landscape scheme, which shows the building in here with the trees in here, which act as some mitigation for any visual impact. So this application is recommended for refusal as outlined in the officer report.
Thank you, Tessa. Now we have 3 speakers on this one, so again we'll have to have a switch over after the first 2. First 2 are Will Jewett and Ella Theobald, who are sharing 3 minutes. I don't know who would like to start. Okay.
Good afternoon. Our family have farmed the land for nearly 80 years, and Zella and I are now very involved. We are currently renting accommodation, and we are seeking to repurpose the non-designated heritage asset to provide a home for our future, together with the obvious benefits of living on site to assist the farming business. At the committee in April, the key areas of debate related to whether the proposal was disproportionate to the site and whether the proposal was a conversion or development. For the assessment, we have established what the original building was in 1948 and if what remains on site is in lawful use. We have, with great interest, referred to the sale particulars of 1942. This consisted of the pitched roof element and the eastern flat roof part. Therefore, these 2 parts constitute the one building that was there in 1948 as the original building and is all currently in lawful use. For clarity, the eastern part of the building, which is concrete blocks clad with timber, are built upon the original stone walls, and this was a certified lawful alteration. With reference to the 1942 particulars and the site investigations that have been carried out since the last committee, we can confirm that the size of the eastern part is as the plan shows, because the low-level walls that have been exposed still remain. Furthermore, the large stone coins on the gable end offer evidence of the built form. The proposal brought forward cannot be disproportionate, as it is smaller than the structure which stood there in 1948, and the increase in size is less than 1/3 from what lawfully exists today. The proposal is a conversion and alteration to a lawful existing building within the original building volume. The planning officer has referred to appeal decisions relating to buildings which are either in a ruinous state or no longer exist. Clearly, Crewcroft Barn is not comparable because it's not a ruin and the entire building is in lawful use. The case officer is suggesting that we discard the eastern part of the non-designated heritage asset, these low-level walls. This, in our minds, is poor conservation, given the history of the entire building and the structures that remain on site. Whilst there are some elements of reconstruction, these are not major and do not relate to the entire building. Therefore, it is considered that the repurposing of this heritage asset outweighs any concerns in order to safeguard the building.
Zella?
We are putting forward a solution to convert and alter this important building whilst providing a self-build, sustainable and innovative home for working members of the rural community, supported by both parishes, all adjoining neighbours and the local ward members. If the committee is minded to go with the planning officer's recommendation, then we respectfully request whether the decision could be deferred pending a site visit. We hope, however, that in light of this new evidence, you can now support us. Thank you.
Thank you both. I understand one of you is going to allow Councillor McCabe to come in and speak. Thank you. Okay, I think you know the drill more than anyone, Councillor McCabe, so when you're ready.
Apart from that bit, thank you, Chair, thank you, members. We're here because two different officers have taken contradictory views on the nature of this property. You've heard the history. In 1948, there was a large barn with an additional three-sided separate barn tacked onto the end. Okay, so a big barn, small barn. Then there was a collapse in the big barn, and the applicants came forward with a request to restore the original big barn. The council said to them, no, don't try and create a pastiche of some past that's gone. Put something modern and appropriate for the time up, clad in materials that are subservient to the stonework, i.e. wood cladding. So, shortly after it went up, they decided to get a certificate of lawfulness, and that clearly states a position that the concrete block part is an alteration to part of the original building, The remains of the original building consist of the pitched roof stone barn, the small barn, and the low-level walls up to about 6 foot, and the gable end of the original big barn. The officer at the time concluded, once they'd put up this modern bit, that it was not overdevelopment, that it fitted the rural context and did not harm the visual amenity. In other words, it was policy compliant. Now we have an application for a change of use with some further alterations, and suddenly we have a very different outcome, because the officer this time has decided that the original building is just the extension and refers to the lawful changes that were carried out as the extension. So you have two extensions, one to the original barn and one to replace the original barn. Now that can't be right. Because of this decision, and remember this is a three-sided stone building up against the gable wall of the original big barn, this decision that that bit is the only element that constitutes the original building means that they're now telling the applicant that they can't have the volume for development, which, frankly, considering we told them to build it, is fairly preposterous. This is a lawful agricultural storage building, as the design required by the council is ruled on by the council, and yet suddenly they're not allowed to have the volume as part of the development. Not only that, but if you pick up one of the stones off the ground and put it back onto the wall to strengthen the original wall of the big barn, that counts as overdevelopment. It's an extraordinarily silly situation we're in. Both parish councils and both ward councils think this is entirely acceptable because the applicant has submitted a design that tells the story of the buildings on site. So reference to the original stone buildings, the 2 stone barns joined together, a bit of support work for that gable end to make sure it doesn't fall down, and this modern barn bit that we told them to build. If you need a piece of legislation to realise just that the current officer's ruling is wrong, then I would draw your attention to the NPPF, which states with regard to the development of isolated homes in the countryside that these are allowable in certain circumstances. And I would draw your attention to circumstance B. The development would represent optimum viable use of a heritage asset or would be appropriate enabling development to secure the future of heritage asset. I put to you that this design is the optimum viable use, and it preserves the heritage elements. It does exactly what we want it to do. Now you have to decide whether or not adding hay bales in for insulation constitutes major redevelopment of the site, but I would put it to you that you should look at the original certificate of lawfulness regarding the building we told them to put up, the modern bit, and look at the fact that it will deliver increasing biodiversity net gain on the site, and actually in terms of building something to Passive House standards, that's what we brag about when we build a school, you know, that we built it to Passive House standards, but surely we shouldn't be in the position of turning around to members of the public and saying, sorry, no, you can't do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. You can stay here or go back into council chamber. It's up to you. I can now invite members to ask questions of the officer. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, can I just clarify? It clearly says it's a barn conversion, and to my way of thinking, a barn conversion is a limited change within the same footprint and the structure. I thought that barn conversions shouldn't, the structure already has to be sufficient for it to be a barn conversion. Could it just be clarified exactly that sort of ruling, please, by one of the officers?
Yeah, I mean, the policy talks about, let me just quickly find it. The building should be not temporary or intersubstantial construction, is capable of conversion without substantial or complete reconstruction or major extension. So there is a judgment there of whether it's a major extension or not. There's also obviously then the green belt that you need to consider as part of the assessment.
Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
I've got rather confused between the narrative from Councillor McCabe and the narrative from the officer. And I'm looking at point 2 on page 106, requirement to not be of temporary or insubstantial construction and capable of conversion. Just looking at it from my perspective, I would say that this does not fall foul of that sentence, but what I'm confused about is the further down the page, it talks about a very substantial extension. I haven't quite got in my mind what the dimensions are of the wooden cladding bit, because I'm not convinced that building in that location, on that footprint, is really that substantial. And my second question relates a bit to what Councillor Davis had just said. I'm not sure why we're looking at it as 2 separate units, a stone barn and an extension, when in fact what the applicant is seeking to do is an integrated whole, so a living area. And finally, I don't really know where this is. If we could have a little bit more on the location. I think I've been through Hinton Charterhouse about 5 times in the 18 years I've lived here. So if we could just have a bit of indication of location too, please. How isolated is it, is my question.
So this part here forms the extension to the stone building. So this is the existing stone building that you can see in the photographs. These stone walls here will be built up using some of the existing stone that remains on site, and this part here will be the extension. So the existing timber-clad building will be removed, or extension will be removed, so this is the extension. So the officers have concluded that this is a kind of a substantial extension to the building and does not comply with the policy. In terms of the location, if we just go back to here. I have to be honest, because it's not my application, I've not as familiar with the site as I would be. But so this is the location here. So this is Wellow, the village of Wellow, and this is the village of Hinton Charterhouse.
Can you put your mic on, please?
Sorry. How far is it from Bath, or from the nearest village or school or doctor's surgery?
I think Wellow would probably be the nearest school.
Okay, Councillor Jackson, does that clarify your questions? Anybody else got questions for the officer? Councillor Hodge.
Tessa, thank you for that presentation. Sorry, I've got to dig down into the volumes again, and I know it's not your report, but to be consistent in our decision making, we have to look at the volumes and get that right. And I find whichever way I look at this report, I can't make sense of the calculations. And could you show us again the slide of what the applicant put forward? I want to see where the 142 cubic meters, which is the officer's baseline volume, where that comes from and how that relates to the applicant's bigger baseline volume of 827 cubic meters in 1948.
So the officer considers this part to be the original part of the building that's still in situ, so that's counted in the assessment as the original volume by the officer.
Okay.
The applicant has looked back at the historical records of the 1942 sales particular, and I think has taken their volume from this floor plan here, and also looking at what remains there are on site. So we kind of look back at here, they've annotated stone walls of original building 1948, so I think they've pulled together a number of data sources to calculate their volume.
So are all the is there evidence of all the walls still there that are shown in the 1948?
There is evidence on site of some of the walls, and I think that's probably the difference between this application and the last application. They've done some more research, but the office is quite clear that that still can't be counted as an original building because it's not actually there now. So although it was maybe there historically, it's not there now, and the appeals that are referenced conclude that actually if they've not been in existence for a period of time, then they shouldn't count in the original volume.
Okay.
So therefore that's why the officer has concluded that this part is the original volume, but that's the disagreement between the applicant and the officers.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the officer? No? Can we move to the debate then, please? Who would like to start on the debate? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I propose that we overturn the officer's recommendation because I think this is the most sensible way to preserve a non-listed historic asset, and because the design that is proposed will be a considerable improvement on the cladded part, which is quite frankly an eyesore. And have that sticking up in the green belt doesn't enhance it or do anything for it. And this seems to me a sustainable, eco-friendly way of creating a dwelling, which I think it's more appropriate for human beings, and especially a young family, to live in than barn owls and bats, because I think the alternative is that it will fall into ruin. I'm sure our officer can translate that into MPPF speak, but basically we're looking to conserve a non-listed historic asset and improve the appearance of things in the greenbelt. So that's my proposal, that we permit this application.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder before we... Are these all seconders? Who should I pick?
All right, who do you want to pick?
Councillor Hansel.
Okay, I'll second it. Can I just say a few words? I'm sure people remember at the last meeting, I was strongly in favour of supporting the officer at the time because I appreciate the officer is trying to, apply the policies around Greenbelt. And the big argument was about, is this new development or is this conversion of an existing farm building? But with the additional evidence and what I can see with my own eyes, I think this is a conversion of an existing farm building. So I'm happy to second the recommendation. Second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. Councillor Clark, you want to debate?
Well, yeah, I'm still a little bit unhappy the way that... yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah? The way that we can circumvent a debate before it even gets going by making a counter-proposal or making a proposal. So, and it happened with the last one where the debate, which I think should have gone on before we made the decision about the site visit, which I was approving or supportive of. And it seems to me here now we're making a proposal before we've had a debate. And I think this happens far too often at these committee meetings when I think Councillor Jackson was able to express a lot of her views before which got incorporated into a proposal. So I'm just making a plea, as it were, that really we're all given the opportunity to participate in the debate before somebody makes a proposal. Thank you.
Well, regardless of a proposal having been made, the debate can continue, and I will continue with the debate until everybody feels they've had their say before I take a vote. So does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Crossley?
Yes, I disagree with the previous speaker. I think to have a debate, you need a motion, and that allows you to bring out all the points you want to make. And if you disagree with the motion, then you phrase your argument in terms of a disagreement, and you register the fact that if that vote is lost, you have a counter-proposal ready. So I think it is important that the motion forms the basis of the debate. Otherwise, we're just talking about things without a debate. So I'm quite happy with you taking Councillor Jackson's proposal at the start, and in fact I think that's the way it should happen to frame the debate. I like this application. What always concerns me is when we get advice given which I sometimes feel is not the advice that this committee would given. I would certainly not have asked the applicant to build a timber frame extension to any stone building. But there we are. That was what was asked, and that was what delivered, and that's what we're considering. So I think there's several aspects about the way planning operates, and particularly if advice is given and then that is taken, then I think that has to be quite clearly a key part of it. But I like this extension. I like this application. I reach a different conclusion from the case officer, that I think it is acceptable development in the building. As Councillor Jackson says, I think it's a good way of enhancing and preserving the structure, the important structures there. So I'm more than happy to be voting for the motion as proposed by Councillors Jackson and Hansel.
Thanks, Councillor Crossley. I have Councillors Hodge, then Councillor Clark, then Councillor McPhee at the moment. Councillor Hodge.
I just wanted to make a point about the process before the debate, and I think we have agreed in the past that when, as you said, I think, Chairman, that when a motion comes forward early on, we kind of park the motion, and everybody has an opportunity to carry on debate until we've exhausted debate, actually, and then we go back. And previously, we've gone around the room and said, has everybody had had this the thing. I think we agreed that about a year ago, so I just wanted to bring that up again. Yeah.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to get too bogged down in process, other than to say if we follow Councillor Crossley's recommendation, there should be a proposal, because that's what he said, before any debate commences. But I'll put that's what he said, and I'm sure that's not what happens here. But I'll stop on the process, because actually I'm quite supportive of the application.
Thank you. Councillor McPhee.
Well, all I would say is that if you don't let me speak, I'll vote against you, which is what I did last time. As regards this particular application, I voted for it last time. It's stronger than it was with the 1948 data. We're short of houses. A very nice house is being offered. And I'm really surprised that the officer being faced with the 1948 results didn't change their mind, really, quite frankly. So I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee. I'm sorry you're upset about my previous decision. Do we have any more speakers? Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, first of all, on the point about the debate, I think it's important that you should consider all options and all opinions before you come to a conclusion. So coming up with a conclusion before the debate's even started is perhaps not the right way to be doing it. With regard to this application, I think it seems that whether this is policy compliant is open to interpretation, which gives us scope to use common sense, and common sense says that we should approve this planning application.
Thank you. Do I have any more contributors to the debate before we vote? No? Okay, so can we just be clear about, are you happy with what the... It's not on. Try again. Oh, now it is.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it is for members if they wish to come to a different view from officers. The thing to consider here is whether you agree that it's inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. If you do, then it's necessary, obviously, to put forward very special circumstances as to why that should be permitted. And if you decide to do that, it's obviously just important just to be clear what those are.
So, inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, and you'd like us to be clearer about what the exceptional circumstances are to allow that?
The very special circumstances, if
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Chair, I'm really struggling to hear Ms. James. If she could bend her microphone down a bit more, please. However, I gather that she's finding it difficult to formulate the reasons why we should permit this. I'm just wondering if, in fact, we should have delegate to permit. But basically, the idea is to conserve an important non-listed historic asset and to enhance the green belt, or the ambiance of the green belt. I'm sorry, I can't think of the correct policies to go with this at the moment, so I'm just wondering if the officers were more comfortable with delegate to permit, because it's no use just stating a negative that, in my view, and I believe the view of the people who've spoken, this is not inappropriate development in the green belt. It is something quite appropriate in order to achieve the aims that I've mentioned. I don't know what the seconder of the motion would think to changing it to delegate.
Councillor Hounsell, do you want to add?
Right, I mean, the point I made is that from what I could see in the history, that we were talking about the conversion of an existing farm building and not a new development, and that was the key difference from me to the last debate. So if we're looking for reasons for this decision, it's taking a different view of that of that discussion. So don't now consider it as new development, consider it as a conversion of an existing farm building.
Thank you. I think we have Councillor Davis.
This really goes back to my original question. A conversion of a barn is a size that maybe they go to the 42 size. Has this got an extension onto it, which then develops us into the green belt? Is really where I'm struggling a little bit. Perhaps it could just be clarified again.
I think there's a discussion going on to my right which might help with this. Yeah, so is it any clarity on what we can use here for the reason?
Sorry about that, it's a little bit difficult under these circumstances.
Yes, it is very difficult.
Obviously, we're listening to the debate and we're trying to assist members to come to the decision that they are coming to, rather than obviously impose a decision. So listening to the debate, it would appear to us that the conclusion is being reached that it's not, that it is inappropriate development, but that very special circumstances apply here. That's what I'm taking from the debate. And if that is the case, it is perfectly acceptable for members to come to the view that in this case, very special circumstances exist, and to put forward what those special circumstances might be. And some of the circumstances that potentially might be considered here relate to the building itself and the use of the building, the heritage assets, and the sustainable nature of the reuse of the building in this location. Those are the sorts of things that members have discussed here and which may potentially be put forwards in this particular case. So that is what my advice might be to members.
Did you have something to add, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, Chair, so what I've taken from it is that...
Can you put your mic closer?
Sorry, is that better? Yeah. So what I've taken from the debate is that I think the reasons behind the motion are essentially, firstly, that the development will conserve the heritage assets, and that it's a very sustainable form of development, and secondly, that it will enhance the visual appearance of the green belt. Now, obviously, it's a matter for members, as a matter of your planning judgment, whether you feel that those amount to very special circumstances which clearly outweigh the harm to the green belt.
Thank you. So, Councillor Jackson, as the proposer, are you happy with that?
I think that's the most admirable way of summarising the debate, and although it's sort of flipping the coin, I think it's absolutely right. Given what the MPPF says about development in the Greenbelt, I think that the inappropriateness of a conversion of this nature is far outweighed by the necessity to preserve a non-listed historic asset and to improve the appearance of the Greenbelt, the vista, because it's an eyesore, and this is a way of getting rid of it, to put it very bluntly.
So are we back to a permit now? Sorry, hold on a moment. Tessa, did you want to speak?
Sorry, I was just going to suggest delegate to permit to allow officers to recommend conditions on the permission.
Yes, so we're on a delegate to permit. Yeah? And second, are you happy with that? Okay, good. That's painful. Right, so we're taking a vote to overturn the officer's decision here for the reasons stated. Can I have a vote for all those in favour? And against? And abstentions?
So that was 8 in favour and 2 abstentions.
Thank you.
Could we have a 3-minute break, please?
Yes, of course. If we could have a short break, comfort break for the committee. Thank you. Just 5. That was a 5-minute break, Councillor Crossley. Okay. So I think we're ready to start. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. This application is for a proposed first floor extension.
Sorry. No, I was indicating to the officer behind you.
Oh, beg your pardon, sorry.
Sorry, are we all ready to start?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I'll start again. I was indicating to our IT officer that he was ready for us to start, and now I have a thumbs up. Thank you. That was tricky. So we're on to the next item, which is 3 Barrowview, Timsbury Road, Farnborough, Bath, and I'd like to invite the case officer, Isabel Dayon, to present her report. Thanks, Isabel.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is an application for the erection of a first floor side extension at 3 Barrowview on Timsbury Road. Here you've got the site location plan. It's a semi-detached dwelling, and on the aerial view you can just see it there. It's outside of the housing development boundary and is within the green belt. So these are the existing building elevations. You've got the original dwelling, which is the main part of the dwelling, and then a side extension and existing rear extensions, which you can see at the bottom. Existing floor plans, where again you can see the kind of main original part of the dwelling and the extensions to the side and the rear. And then we have the proposed elevations. So the proposed side extension is going to be built over the existing lean-to make a first floor extension. It's got a small dormer on the front, and the materials will match the existing dwelling.
Isabel, could you get a little bit closer to the mic or speak a bit louder? It's quite hard to hear you. Thank you. Councillor Jackson, could you turn your mic off?
And then we've got the existing floor plans here. So you can see that the first floor extension will kind of form an extension of an existing bedroom, and it will give more bedroom space and an ensuite bathroom. These are some floor plans. They were referenced in the update report. They show the neighbouring property at number 4 Barrow View, who have a similar side extension. And then they also show the floor plans for number 3 with the side extension, so you can see a comparison in the scale of the two. Then we've got some site photos. So the first one, number 3, is the property with the green doors on the front. So that's looking towards number 3. And then the other image is looking towards number 4. So you can see that they have a side extension of a fairly similar design. Another image more from the front this time, so you can see the pair of the dwellings together, and then an image of the back of the property with the rear extensions. So the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons outlined in the officer report, and I'm happy to take any questions after the speakers.
Thank you, Isabel. So we have a speaker here with us, Mr. Spragg. If you'd like to turn your microphone on and start when you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Yep. So this application is for a proposed first floor extension to this Edwardian semi-detached property to provide an ensuite facility to the principal bedroom, and it's to resemble a similar extension constructed at the attached neighbouring property number 4. The applicants have owned the property since 1972, and when purchased it had an attached 1960s single garage and a rear wing accommodating the kitchen. They've undertaken 2 extensions to the property during their 49-year ownership, one being the replacement of the 1960s garage with a utility workshop, and the second being the side extension to the original rear kitchen wing. During this work, it was established that the kitchen walls were 18 inches thick and of solid rubble stone construction, with an outer face exactly matching the original building. This solid form of construction predates cavity wall construction methods, which by the 1930s were prevalent, and therefore demonstrates that the rear wing is original to the house, or at the very least an early extension predating 1948, and is therefore considered as part of the original envelope of the building. A pre-application inquiry was originally submitted detailing the extent of the development undertaken by the applicants, and provided scaled floor plans, photographs of all sides of the property, and an artist's impression of the proposed extension. The response was positive and stated that the proposed extension design is of a similar appearance to that of the neighbouring property at number 4, and will therefore regain some balance to the attached pair, and that the extension will not represent a disproportionate addition over and above the size of the original building, and is considered appropriate development in the green belt, and would likely receive a favourable consideration. Following the submission of a formal planning application, the case officer advised that with the benefit of the scaled elevations, the extension amounted to 56.7% increase to the original building, and was therefore considered disproportionate and unacceptable development. This calculated volume increase fails to consider the historic fabric and development of the property, and contrary to the evidence, has included the kitchen wing as a post-1948 extension. If the percentage volume increase is adjusted to omit the original kitchen wing, the overall combined volume increase of the proposed and previous extensions amounts to 38%, which is within usually accepted tolerances of greenbelt development, and amounts to less than the developed volume of the attached neighbour. This proposed extension is subservient to the host building, regains balance to the street scene, does not increase the footprint and sprawl of the building, and is considered to be consistent with the neighbouring property and within acceptable greenbelt development tolerances. And the applicants therefore respectfully request that the committee upholds the pre-application advice and grants consent for the proposed extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spragg. And Councillor Davis, as Ward Councillor for, I believe you'd like to make a statement here.
It's only very short, just to say, when I saw it come to me, obviously as Vice Chair, I was quite surprised to see it, in the sense I know the property, and those of you who go on the buses by there, Councillor Jackson, you'll pass it frequently, because as you can see, the other side already has a very similar extension, so I was quite surprised, and you just heard the history of the site. Maybe I think we just need to debate it quite fully as to what the future ought to be of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. So we can move to questions to the officer. Councillor Jackson.
I wonder if the officer could take up the point that's been made by the speaker about how the volumes was calculated, because I'm afraid I'm not very clear about that. And this information which the applicant has supplied that suggests that the kitchen extension was actually, because of the thickness of the walls, part of the original building. I wondered if that had been taken into account in the calculations on the volume permissible in a green belt.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So the original building that I have taken is this part here, the main building. I actually haven't seen the evidence that this was original. This hasn't been presented to me, and the fact that, you know, it's disputed here that the increase is actually 30%, 38% hasn't been presented to me, so I haven't assessed that. So I have assessed that the original building is the main part of the building, and that the extensions include the parts to the rear and the lean-to to the side, which replaced a garage, which was built in about 1960, so wouldn't have been original anyway. So by my calculations, the original building is 341 metres cubed or thereabouts. Previous additions amount to 154 metres cubed, and the new addition is 40 metres cubed, which amounts to 56% increase. I haven't had the information, as I say, presented about the originality of the kitchen element to the rear, so haven't had the chance to consider that.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
I just wondered if you could explain what weight we can give to the changes that have happened at number 4, given that they were under different planning regulations at the time.
Yes, so the application at number 4, I think, was approved in around 2002. So obviously, yeah, you're right, under a different policy context and kind of a different kind of assessment of the greenbelt. So we, you know, without kind of looking into that case and knowing what the other material considerations were at the time, it's not really comparable to this case because we have to assess it under the kind of legislation and policies that we have before us. So in my view, it should be given kind of relatively limited weight given the time period which has elapsed since it was approved, but that's kind of a matter for the committee to decide.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? No? Let's move to the debate then. Who would like to open the debate? No takers? Oh, sorry, Councillor Davis. Yes, the ward councillor should go first anyway.
You're quite happy to open the debate. I think this is a tricky one in the sense that the other side, it does match, and the differing information that they've had through pre-app doesn't help the situation, because an officer there, not the same officer, but an officer there said it was okay, as the agents just explained and what he said to us. So I do think it's difficult to decide. As I said, when I saw it come to me, I was surprised because it didn't cross my mind that it wasn't, you know, it was going to be any more than 30%, knowing what they'd done in 2002 on the other side. Obviously, I should know, perhaps the policy might have changed slightly, but I was not aware of any problems with the one in 2002, and I was the ward councillor then, and I'm sure if it had been an issue, it would have come my way then. So I really do ask you to look at this. In fact, if I'm really honest, I think what we've got in front of us there is possibly better than on the other side, but that isn't a decision we have to make. We have to look at what we've got here. Yeah, I just ask that you sort of look at it it's actually only a small bit now that they want to put on there because underneath is already there. It's the, I think it was 40 cubic metres was mentioned.
Thank you. Councillor Crossley?
Sorry, no. Right, thank you very much. Well, I think this should be permitted myself, and in view of the previous complaint about the order, I won't actually move anything until there's been a wider debate, but my view is that this bit should be permitted. I think what it does, if we look at policies D1, D2, D3 and D5 of playmaking, it actually enhances the street scene. And to me, that is the overriding consideration, that what you've got here is a planning application that considerably improves the street scene. It provides balance and harmony to the building, and I think it's a moot point whether we get into the argument about the extra space or not, and whose calculations we agree on and whose lines of walls we think are appropriate or not. To me, the reason we should approve this is because it is a visual improvement in the green belt to this street scene by bringing harmony and balance back to this building.
Thank you. Councillor McPhee?
I didn't fully understand the kitchen argument, but if I got it right, if the information had been presented to the officer, she might have done a different calculation. Is that correct, Councillor Jackson?
Well, as you know, I struggle with deafness. I think the speaker was saying that he had produced evidence and presented it to the officer that the kitchen, the so-called kitchen extension, was actually part of the original house, or at least predated the 1948 legislation. And therefore, this raised a question about the calculations as to whether the volume of the proposed extension would exceed what's permissible in the green belt.
Could I, excuse me, could questions be addressed through the chair, please?
I beg your pardon. So if that is the case, that's quite a crucial point, isn't it? That the calculation on which the refusal is based is not right.
Okay, Sarah James would just like to make a short statement here.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make clear and clarify before we go further to making a decision on the application, and the basis for that is to understand if there is new evidence that is being discussed. Councillor Jackson talked about new calculations, and it's not clear to me whether the case officer has seen those. So if the committee has taken into account calculations that have not been presented and assessed, then my advice to the committee would be that the application is deferred so that the case officer can have that information and properly assess it and bring back her advice to the committee having made that assessment.
That sounds like a very sensible thing to do. Councillor McPhee, sorry we interrupted you midstream. Microphone's not on.
Does it require a motion? If so, I'll make one.
Yes, it would.
I move that we defer further discussion pending examination of new material.
Is that okay as a wording? And do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Clark? Seconding that motion. Okay, so we have a motion on the table to defer. Do I need to take a vote on that straight away? Or can we continue with debate? Right, so we can continue with the debate with that on the table. Councillor Clark.
Can I just ask a question? Could we have a photograph of the existing extension on the other side so we can see them? Or was it presented and I just missed it at the time?
I think if we can go back to it.
Is that one okay, or do you want me to move to the... I've got that one as well.
All right, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge, long time ago you put your hand up.
Actually, I was going to make the point about the taking on board that new information, and that we couldn't really take it on board, so it's been resolved now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Davis?
I'll wait to see what the outcome is of the deferral.
Okay. Does anybody else want to contribute to the debate? Councillor Malloy. Keep going. I think they come on. There you go. It's on now.
Has to warm up, yeah. No, I was just...
Can you move it closer to your face, though?
Yeah, is that better? I was just going to make a comment or an observation, really, about number 4 and number 3, and I can understand the argument for the extension at number 3 to mirror, to some extent, the one at number 4, but they're not actually that similar. Number 4, looking at the plan, it's quite a different layout, and the extension is set back slightly from the main building, whereas at number 3 it would all be at the same level, so if I'm reading it correctly. And also, just a question about measurements of the width of the extension at number 4 compared to the width of the extension at number 3. That would be quite interesting to know. You know, if that is an argument about it improving the street scene so that it resembles number 4. So would that be information we could
I have some advice on that?
Or maybe I've missed it.
Right, is that a material consideration, the size of the extension at number 4, or is that
the
not?
Width. Thanks.
Obviously, the application before you is on this site, the adjacent property, and the size of that extension. It's not material in so much as, you know, just because one application is of a particular size or one property is of a particular size doesn't mean to say that another one should be of a particular size. But obviously, it's material in so much as it's part of the context of the area.
So the explicit measurements are not so much what's important, but the visual context. Is that okay, Councillor Malloy? Do I have any more people? Councillor Jackson.
I hope I'm allowed to say this. I have a sudden feeling of angels' wings flapping around because they're trying to dance on the head of a pin with the question of calculations. And I actually think Councillor Crossley is quite right. We should permit this application because it will create much more symmetry. I have indeed passed this building numerous times on the 178 bus, and I read it, the street scene originally, as one house. It looked like it had been one house, and then at some point a second dwelling had been created in part of it, but of course that's not correct. But it does still have a sort of visual wholeness about it, and I think that Councillor Crossley is dead right. If we permitted this extension, it would create much more symmetry and a much more pleasing aspect when you're passing on the bus.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Any more speakers to the debate before we vote on the proposal we have before us? Sorry, Councillor Hodge.
Yes, I suppose I'll make the point I was thinking of making previously. Is I suppose I disagree in that I think with the volumes we have to, in the green belt, we have to draw a line somewhere, and a line has been given to us. And if the percentage does turn, I think the percentages are important, and so it's important to get that right with this. We'll look at this in new information, but I'm not quite sure whether the symmetry of both sides of something that was done under a new policy then represents very special circumstances for you know, accepting a higher percentage in this situation. I think it's quite different from the previous case. But I think all that will be resolved by having the volume data clarified, whether it is nearer 33% or is actually nearer 60% change. So I'm glad we're going forward with the process we are. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hodge. Do we have any more contributors to the debate? No? Okay, so the proposal we have before us is to defer so that the officer can get some new information about possible additional floor space that's been introduced today. That fair statement? I'm looking for a nod. Yeah. So all those in favour?
That's 7, Chair.
And against?
That's 1 against.
And abstentions?
And 1 abstention.
Okay.
That's 7 in favour, 2 against and 1 abstention. So that's
So
carried.
that is carried to defer. Thank you very much. So that's the end of our straightforward applications. We have a tree preservation order to discuss now. So if you could just switch over officers for that one, please. Okay, I think we're there now. So I'd like to invite the Officer Jane Brewer to present her report when you're ready. Thank you. And could you keep close to the microphone when you speak? Acoustics in here are very difficult. It's not on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your patience. This tree preservation order relates to an oak tree in Pensford. This is the approximate location of it. I'll show you a bit more information in a moment.
Sorry, could you get a little bit closer? Sorry.
Sorry. Well, that's better, isn't it? This is the A37 along here where the arrow is. This is Wick Lane, where the arrow is here. And this is Stanton Lane here. This map is just taken from the Tree Preservation Order document. So it's a little bit on the blurry side. But this is where the oak is. Oh. And this is an aerial view. The tree preservation order was made following approaches from residents who are concerned about the tree disappearing because of some activity on the site. The site has had past planning applications made on it. An assessment was made of the tree and it was considered to have sufficient public amenity to be worthy of a tree preservation order. To ensure that it's considered should any planning proposals come forward to the parcel of land. The parcel of land I'm referring to is this area where I'm circling with the arrow there. This again is the A37 just running through here, and again Stanton Lane here, and Wick Lane is following the arrow there. I just put this slide in to show councillors where the tree is in relation to the conservation area for Pensford. So it's just on the outside to the south of it, but sort of wrapped around slightly by the conservation area. This picture is taken from within the site, looking into the tree. So this is roughly facing south. This is another one, just taken to an angle, just to show that the level changes here. So this is obviously lower ground here, and the trunk of the tree isn't visible on this photograph because it's tucked up here. This is taken from the entrance where gates are put, and this is we're standing in Wick Lane here, viewing the tree from outside the site. These are extracts from our street views, and this was just to roughly give you an idea of how the tree is viewed from the A37. The yellow line here is pointing at the tree. Because of its raised location, it's quite readily visible, and this is just to show you roughly where this image is taken. This is just a little bit further along from the A37, trying to give you a better view of it. Oh. My request is that councillors confirm the tree preservation order without modification. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. We have one speaker, it's Councillor Paul May, and Councillor Davis is going to make a statement for him. She's unable to be here today.
Thank you. As you say, it's Councillor May. I'm the Baines Councillor serving the Conservation Village of Pensford, is a village within and washed over by the Green Belt. I apologise for asking this statement to be read out, but I'm isolating today because of an operation tomorrow. I formally wish to support the permanent TPO for the oak tree, as recommended by the officer who has summed up the need well. The mature oak tree is located on land between Guy's Farm and the bottom of Wick Lane. The lane is very narrow and steep, so the tree is in an elevated position immediately adjacent to the lovely and historic village and dominates the landscape to the south of the 14th century church in the heart of the village. I cannot overstate how important this tree is, and any activity near it which harms it would be totally inappropriate, as would its felling. The tree has a considerable girth and is probably in excess of 300 years old. Its height and spread are significant at about 20 metres, so it dominates the location it is in and may be vulnerable to harmful activity, which has been recently seen on site. The Parish Council have supported the request for the tree to be TPO'd, and I hope the committee agree with the recommendation because the tree is so valued by local residents as part of the village heritage and wildlife nesting of the birds, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. So if we move to questions to the officer, do we have any? No. So move straight to the debate. Councillor Jackson.
Councillor Crossley put his hand up first.
Oh, did you? Sorry, Councillor Crossley.
No, this looks a wonderful tree. Move the recommendation.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I think this looks like a wonderful oak tree. I move the recommendation to give a TPO.
Lovely, thank you. And who will second? Councillor Hodge.
Happy to second, yeah.
Okay, anybody want to add anything? Councillor Jackson.
Well, I think this is absolutely magnificent. I've been trying to grow an oak.
Could you get a little bit nearer?
Sorry. I think this is really a magnificent oak tree, and unfortunately, because of the scourge of the fungal disease that's affecting oak trees in this country, they're getting increasingly rare. And this looks like a very healthy specimen. I'm impressed by its age, and I think we should confirm this TPO order, not least because the parish council, who are the people who live with it, have come out so strongly in favour of it, and we should listen to them as well as the ward councillor.
Thank you. Any more contributions to the debate? No, so we'll move to the vote, which is to confirm the TPO without modification. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
Chair, for item 9, because I've got a long-standing close relationship with rugby and have from time to time been a season ticket, I want to declare an interest for the next item and leave the room.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Crossley. So while Jane is packing up, I think we can probably move on. Members are asked to note the enforcement report that was sent out with the report pack. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? No? Okay, that's great. Sorry, Councillor Jackson.
Can I move that we so note the report as requested?
Do I have to do that? I think we can just take it as noted. I don't think we have to vote on it, do we? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Crossley can come back now if he can hear me. Thank you. So item 10, members are also asked to note the appeals report. Any questions or comments on that? No. So date of next meeting, as I mentioned earlier, is Wednesday the 28th of July. Site visit will be on Monday the 9th of July. With that, I'll say thank you to everyone here and everyone watching and formally close the meeting. Thank you.